and then I'll check it out, make sure we're live on my phone too.
Okay.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Community Coffee Time. Woo. All right, we are live on Facebook. Oh, of course, my phone sounds on. So we're live on Facebook. I'll be watching the comments. There is like a 20-second delay, but I'll be keeping an eye on Facebook if anybody's watching live right now. Otherwise, watchers, please feel free to leave comments later or connect with us later. We'll definitely interact and answer any questions that you guys have. But otherwise, we will get started. Today we have Mim Bartos, an occupational therapist who runs her business Beyond Sensory. I'm getting tongue-tied today. Here in Denver, Colorado. And today we're just going to talk about what she does, relationship-based therapy, sensory processing integration, and then we're going to end with an activity that Mim has to increase social awareness and connection. So I'm excited about that. I have these little papers ready to go. So I don't know what's going to happen. Mim, I'm so excited to talk to you and to continue learning about you and your work and what you do. I feel like I'm always learning, and I'm so excited to keep learning and to also share this with our community. So just to get that knowledge out and about what you know and your services. So to start, would you mind giving us a quick introduction and kind of tell us about your business?
Yeah, and this is just so fun. I love that you make these community coffee times available, these
Yeah.
conversations. I've been looking forward to this, so thank you for what you do.
Of
To
course, and they're super casual.
Yeah,
As you could probably tell already, very casual. Oh, I almost forgot. I'm drinking coffee. It is community coffee time.
that's right.
Do you have
I
coffee?
have
Water?
coconut water.
Coconut water. That sounds lovely.
It is very
I
lovely.
try to remember, and of course I'm out of order, but I try to remember what are we drinking today. Let's
Yeah,
on our community coffee time. I love it. Coconut water.
I don't drink coffee, so sorry.
Hey, fair enough. I have a homemade vanilla latte, but the rest of the day I drink tea pretty
Ah,
consistently the rest of the day. So,
nice. Yeah, good way to start your morning with a little caffeine sometimes, I guess, huh?
oh yeah.
So, like you said, my name is Mim Bartos, and I am an occupational therapist, and my company is Beyond Sensory, and I work with individuals with sensory processing disorder and children and families in the Denver metro area. And I really value meeting families where they are and what their current situation is. So even before COVID, had things set up where I would do virtual sessions with them if necessary, or we would meet at parks or other areas within the community that process just really helps to increase that awareness of how we can use what's available in our community to help address what our sensory needs are, but also gives us that opportunity to identify where the challenges are and to figure out what strategies and supports can be helpful within that real life experience. Um, so that's something I really enjoy. I love meeting families where they are and providing them with the tools and strategies that they need. Start out every conversation with a new family with the fact that this is not about me. I'm here for you. And therapy in the process that I use is about empowering the individual, empowering the parents, empowering the child, providing information and tools so that no matter when and where, they've got some knowledge, information, or strategy that can provide them with some success within that situation.
That's awesome. I
Yeah.
really like how you're like I meet them like where they're at, even like in the community level. I know
Yeah.
generalization is like a big kind of buzzword in therapy
Yeah.
of like making sure it transfers, because sometimes like in a clinic space it can feel so clinical, or the kid's gonna act completely different than they would like at a park. So it's cool that you with your business you're able to really get to those places to see those needs where they're at too.
Yeah. And I've always been very family focused throughout my career, and even having meetings and conversations with families about how to implement within their own environment and their own setting. I still felt like there was a missing piece. And so this has been such a really nice step to kind of launch my own practice a while back and be able to really meet families where they are and help support them in that process, like you said, of generalizing information and knowledge and skills that they have into those real life settings that are much more unpredictable than that clinic-based setting, like you said.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, that's so cool. And speaking of family, I think that could get us right into our next question. What is relationship-based therapy, and what does a typical session look like for you, if that is even a thing? Because it sounds like sessions could look really different.
They can look very different, and um, really the way that I approach things is from a foundational bottom up approach. So it doesn't matter where we are, what we are doing, if we have the understanding of what the foundational concepts are that are supportive for this child, or what situations are more challenging, then we've got the information that we need to help make whatever situation be therapeutic or successful, just depending on what our goal is at that time. So, for example, your first question, let me answer that first. You said, so what is relationship-based therapy? Before we jump into some examples of what it might look like. I really think that the best answer to that is to talk about how relationship is so foundational to our ability to regulate. And our ability to regulate is foundational to our ability to complete any of our daily activities. There's such a way for people to connect with this concept right now with COVID and the isolation that people are experiencing. And that lack of connection with other people has been so predominant. And the reason that that's so difficult is because that ability to connect with others, really engage and relate with others in meaningful ways, feeds our nervous system in such a way that provides us with information and cues about whether or not we are safe in our world. And those cues of safety then help us feel regulated in the moment and help us interact with others and continue to develop those social emotional skills and continue to provide us with that sense of a strong anchor point that, from which we can then better process sensory information and develop our motor skills and abilities, or whatever other areas we are working to develop. So does that kind of help answer that question?
Yeah, definitely. I think I've started looking more into recently relational neuroscience, and that's like exactly what you're talking about, how our brains are just wired for connection, like literally,
Yes.
like
Yes.
physically wired for connection. So if you don't go into therapy with relationship based, I like how you're emphasizing that safety and how you have to feel safe, like sensory wise, and in that relationship to work on other things, or you're kind of like shooting yourself in the foot, if you're trying to work on stuff and the client feels unsafe.
Yes. And it's kind of a concept or an example that has been really helpful to talk about with families over the years is we all had a similar experience where we walk into a room perhaps and we're like, whoa, what just happened in here? Like you weren't there for whatever explosion just happened or what uncomfortable situation just occurred, but you walk in the room and you feel it.
I have a really good situation in my head.
And so that's kind of bringing in this concept of how tuned into each other we actually are, and how our nervous systems really are picking up all of these cues from other people, whether they are those big cues of discomfort and what just happened in here, or those cues of, okay, everything is safe, I don't need to be worried, and I can relax in this environment. And I was just kind of thinking about, like, as we were getting ready to join into this meeting with each other today, if you hopped on and you saw me kind of like this, you would think, hold on, we're not ready to have a conversation yet, right?
Right. We'd probably have to talk a couple of minutes, and make sure we were ready.
Exactly. And so that's a similar concept to what we would then do in our therapy sessions, is helping the individual recognize what their body's feeling and what their signals and cues are, so that they can become more aware and meet their needs, and also helping the family members and parents start to recognize in their children what some of these indicators and subtle cues are that indicate that there is a sense of uncertainty, discomfort, lack of safety in that moment. And that lets us know then, if those cues are there, it doesn't make sense to practice a skill of like writing their name or tying their shoes or kicking a ball or engaging in some sort of a cognitive task or activity that's hard, because we're working way too high. The nervous system is giving cues and signals that says, hold on, I'm not ready for that. And if we do try to do these higher skill-based therapeutic approaches when the foundational regulation isn't intact, that's when you're going to have meltdowns and frustration and avoidance and resistance and fights, and it's just yucky. So that approach just doesn't work.
Right.
And what we want to do is help provide that nervous system with all of the cues of safety from others within the context of relationship, and from within their own body with how they're processing sensation. So those are kind of the two big things that are foundational to my work, is, relationship engagement and meaningful connection and interaction, and the processing of sensory information. So before we go on to the sensory part, kind of that question of like what a session looks like that's pulling in that relationship piece, because we've talked a lot about it, but now just a few examples. And I think talking specifically about a few instances might be really helpful. So for example, there is a client that I worked with at one time who had significant difficulty with any separation from her parents, even if they would go into another room. They'd say, okay, I'll be right back, and off they go. And she would have just a really big emotional response to that. And that was really rooted in her kind of previous trauma experiences from birth, where she experienced that separation. So what we did in those sessions was really focus on together time, fun togetherness, and setting up situations where this child felt comfortable and motivated and interested to have a separation and then reunite with the parent. So for example, they would be stacking blocks together on the table, and a block would fall on the floor. She would then be motivated to climb off the mother's lap, pick up the block, and bring it back up to the table. And eventually was able to feel comfortable enough to not always be sitting on her mother's lap, but to feel comfortable enough to be across from her at the table, to be playing with blocks together, and then to have new ideas and go and get the toy and bring them back. So instead of her feeling this experience of, oh, I'm being left, feeling secure and comfortable in that connection with her mother, so that she felt confident enough to have that separation and reunite.
Right, and it sounds like you had to build it up. Like you couldn't just like, okay,
yeah.
Mom, leave the room. Like...
Yes, right. Which again, like practicing mom leaving the room, that's a skill way up here. And we're trying to pull this child up to be okay with what we want them to do, rather than really having a foundational approach of like, let's build this little girl's nervous system up with cues of comfort and safety by fun, loving connections that are playful interactions with her mother with these blocks, so that she's got all these cues of safety that she feels comfortable and confident to have that separation.
Awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah. With an older child that I'm working with, this example I think is really fantastic, because the initial concern is about feeding skills and eating, and the way we are incorporating social connection and relationship-based therapy is that we are not starting out working in the kitchen with food, because there are cues within this child's nervous system of unsafety and discomfort associated with previous experiences that we need to kind of help her adjust within her nervous system how she feels. So, for example, what we do in our sessions then is have teamwork time and playful time in games such as perhaps it's a three-legged race across the living room type of thing, or it's a obstacle course that you have to climb across, but somehow you have to always stay in contact with your teammate that is your parent, your safe other. And we incorporate different levels of communication into this. And first, maybe would have a secret word that says, something's not working. And so I had one kid years ago, that word was apples. Every time he would say apples, that meant everybody would freeze and we would figure out what the problem was so that we could fix it together. And this builds those cues of safety and comfort with another person who can be a co-regulator to help prevent those spikes in escalation when things go wrong and are difficult to solve or manage. And so through these playful games of climbing and crawling and building different obstacle courses and sharing ideas, we are able to help this child recreate an experience of trust and safety and comfort with another person within the context of a challenging situation. Then we can take that into the kitchen and they've got that experience already, that they've got comfort, and now are able to start to explore foods together and know that there's going to be a supportive response from that parent because they have such a long history together.
Right, and you can almost use the word still in the kitchen, right? Like,
yeah.
Apples can still.
Yeah.
Something's wrong. Something's not working.
Something that's wrong.
And they've built that trust that the adults are going to respond.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. And there's different levels to that. Sometimes it's a secret word that anybody in the family can use. For example, like siblings or parents, anybody, because everybody's nervous system goes through these ups and downs. And we want to normalize this experience for everybody to recognize that we all have these ups and downs. And we all do rely on each other for support and connection and regulation. Before kids reach that point where they're able to have that secret word, though, sometimes we need to provide the parents with information to read the cues, the facial expressions, the body language, that nonverbal communication that child may be giving out. And then the parent then would use the secret word to kind of set the precedence, like, oh, I'm noticing something's going on. We're going to put a pause in place here and figure it out. So we can drop down from way up here down to here where your nervous system is right now.
Awesome. That's so cool. That makes so much sense too. And I can tell that you're really passionate about it and the way you're speaking about it. And it just sounds so fun. And it's like, I think, therapy, it's work, I guess, at the end of the day, but it doesn't have to be like terrible.
I absolutely love what I do. Like, I couldn't imagine doing anything else. This is my passion. And I get so much joy out of like giving these moments to the individuals, to the family, and being able to sit back and step back and say, you guys did that, right? Like, it doesn't take the magic of a therapist to come in and create these moments. You can do it.
Right. Oh, it's
and that's
beautiful.
So empowering. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. I love that so much. And like the family focus of it all, I think, is so important. And I know that I feel like before COVID for me, I wasn't as involved with families, maybe a little, and then with online therapy and lessons, you have to be like more involved with the family. And I feel like that's just like really helped things improve in different ways that hadn't before, because you have everyone on this like team together.
Yes. And I have really enjoyed a lot of things that have come out of this kind of shift, because I've always had a tendency, like I said, to really provide these moments for the family. Like, it's not about me. I want to give this to you. And I think that by doing telehealth sessions over Zoom, that's even provided greater opportunity for that, because I'm not even physically in that space. And sometimes it's been really helpful to have, if we're working with a family situation, a parent and child, have the parent put in a little earbud, and then the kids don't even hear how I'm coaching the parents. And I've had some really fantastic experiences that way, where meltdowns have been prevented or responded to in such a way that it really was an experience on the child's part to have that parent have some new skills and strategies to try that they responded to, and it completely, totally was their moment. And it's just beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, it's so beautiful. That's
Yeah.
awesome. And then the parent just gets better and better at it. And
Yes.
you can kind of just
Yeah.
move out and let them improve that way.
Mm-hmm. And in that moment too, there's an opportunity to provide some ideas for sensory input, because I know your next question, you know, you were going to ask about like sensory processing, how that works.
Yeah,
And
we can move into that if you want.
just to tie that to what, you know, I was just talking about with the earbud, it's like, okay, hey, now what you can do is get this blanket and do a little roll them up like a burrito, or get these pillows and kind of provide some body pressure input and see if that helps to calm that nervous system a little bit. And it makes it such a more seamless, smooth process.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And like, because, you know, parents aren't necessarily trained in sensory processing. So
Yeah.
they might not think to roll their kid up in a burrito like in the
Right.
moment. So that coaching's so cool to have.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Should we get into sensory processing a little more?
Sure, unless you have more questions about like what a session might look like. I feel like I get excited and talk about things, and I'm happy to hone in on any more specific questions that you have.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And I think it's going to look different for every family. You could correct me for sure, but it sounds like you're really not only meeting the needs of like the individual kiddo, like a lot of like that person centered, but it's like the family centered of like, okay, what's your situation? What's going on? Where do we meet? Oh, problems in the kitchen. Let's not start there yet. And it sounds really almost individualized in that sense.
It very much is. I'm glad that you asked that, because I like to start out by having conversations and kind of observations that provide some information, so that we can really work on a path that is best for the family. And in that sort of evaluation process, or that getting started process, even, there's a continual question in my mind that I work through. That's why. Okay, why? And so we go from this kind of high level place of a skill of, we can't get dressed and out the door, to, okay, so let's figure out why, and drop down. Okay, and then why, and then drop down, and okay, why. And we get down here. Okay, so it sounds like this is where from like a therapeutic reasoning standpoint, it makes sense to work. And then pairing that together with the concerns that the family is having, and where it would be most beneficial to work, then gets kind of worked out through kind of a conversation that we would have before really launching into sessions, so that we're all on the same page working together.
That I love that so much. You're like really finding like the real problem, if that makes sense. Where it's like,
Yeah.
it looks like the problem's not getting ready for school, but
Yeah.
the actual problem is something down here, and something that we need to work on. It's
Yeah.
building a relationship. It's getting our sensory system regulated.
Yes. So it's not a defiance of, I don't want to listen to you. I don't want to leave this house because you're telling me to. I don't want to get dressed, so I'm not going to. It's okay. So why is that happening? Is there a touch sensitivity in place that clothing is uncomfortable, or putting that bulky jacket on top of the clothes you're already wearing just feels so uncomfortable you want to climb out of your skin? Or is it that the pace is so fast that it's hard to process all of the steps that need to be completed and actually get them done? So the default is, oh, forget it. My nervous system can't handle all that. So it's really through observation and communication that we're able to continue answering that question why, and drop down to where the foundational challenges are, and then address that area and use these kind of cues of safety and relationship that support regulation, so that we can address those sensory processing difficulties that may be in place.
And that's the bottom up approach you were talking about, right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
That makes so much sense. And I'm thinking now, like, oh, I feel like I need to go look at everyone I work with and be like, are we working on the real problem?
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes there can be other things that, it's like peeling off layers of an onion. Sometimes you get in there and you think, oh, okay, so here's some more information. So we're always just open to gathering more information and learning what that nervous system is going to teach us. It's like we may have ideas of what might work. We give it a try. I'm like, let's just test it out. Let's do some experience and we'll get some feedback and communication based on the response, and we'll know how to adapt from there if we need to.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Yeah. That's really cool. Let's dig into the sensory a little more.
Okay.
Could you talk about sensory processing in the brain and how, and we've been talking about this, but how you address sensory imbalances for optimal processing and motor output?
Right. So our sensory systems are very complex, and we have a lot of different sensory systems that not everyone is aware of. There are actually 8 different sensory systems, and we only typically will learn about maybe 5 of them in school. And the way that we process sensation really influences how we are going to understand our bodies and the world around us. So the sensory systems that we typically would learn about in school are what? Like vision, hearing,
taste, smell,
touch. Yeah. And
then not to name the other ones.
Yeah. And then inside our bodies, we have some other senses that interpret how we process movement and our relationship to gravity so that we can stay oriented in space. And then we also have a sensory system that processes information from our muscles and our joints. As we use them, we get some feedback that tells us where our bodies is and how much force we're using. And then we have another sensory system that tells us about some internal signals about our internal states, such as if my heart rate has increased, if I'm starting to have some scared emotions, like you have that tightness in your belly, like that's a sensation. And that one, this internal signal sense, that's called interoception. That one's starting to get a little bit more information coming out about it in the past few years. Our muscles and joints, that's called proprioception. And then our movement position and how we relate to gravity also tells us about speed, changes in head position. That's our vestibular system. And I really don't focus on those words when working with families unless that's important to them, because really it's the concept that is the most important, right? Rather than terminology.
Right, yeah. I remember when I learned those, but it wasn't until late undergrad or after undergrad, and it blew my mind. I was like, oh. And I feel like a lot of the kiddos I work with, that's a lot of the sensory issues are more in the ones in those systems we don't talk about in grade school. It's not, it can be definitely have sensory imbalances anywhere, but that's what I've seen, at least in my experience. It's oh, this is a vestibular thing that we need to address before I can work on other goals.
Yeah, and I think the reason you probably are recognizing that is that there's 4 primary foundational sensory systems that really give us our sense of self and our sense of our body and where we are and help us stay grounded in our own self. And that is the movement system, the muscles and joints, the interoception of our internal signals, and touch. So we only learn about one of those 4 foundational sensory systems that are so foundational and grounding in our regulation and ability to interact with others and develop skills.
Oh, I didn't know that, so I got chills.
Yeah.
I was like, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. It can be mind blowing, right? You're like, oh my gosh. And so
it's more fun to teach kids taste, right?
Right. And so you can feel like you're doing some good work addressing some of those higher level sensory components, which are very powerful and impactful too, I do have to say, but you could still be missing the mark if you don't get down to those foundational ones and really address those. But within, to kind of get back to your question, within each of those sensory systems, the processing of the information is so complex, because first we need to recognize that we had a sensory experience, and then we need to process how meaningful is this sensory information to me. It's kind of this hierarchy of am I safe or not. And this is where you can sometimes see that over responsiveness or under responsiveness to a sensory input. And just an example of that would be what we talked about earlier, feeling uncomfortable, like you're going to crawl out of your skin by putting on certain clothing textures. That would be an over response to touch input, as an example. And people can be maybe familiar with situations of like covering your ears or bothered by loud sounds. But there's also these internal experiences, such as being over responsive to movement, perhaps, and as a result, being less active and more still because movement doesn't feel comfortable. Then there are also kind of times where you could be under responsive. And if you're under responsive to movement, you could potentially be moving less because it doesn't have as much meaning to you. Or you could be moving a whole bunch because you're like, whoa, what is this out here? I wasn't aware of this.
Right.
And so there's kind of that first line of, do I register the sensory input? And then how meaningful is it to me? And then this next stage of, what are the fine, small properties and qualities of that sensation that then I can use to be efficient with my response? So I could potentially, with movement, for example, I could be moving a lot, but I might not be able to have enough precise interpretation of it to catch my balance when I trip and fall, or to catch my balance when I trip and so I fall, rather than just trip, something like that. And each of our sensory systems interacts with the other ones. We are full bodies of multiple systems. We aren't isolated out into these separate things. So we need to look at that interaction of how the sensory systems communicate with each other and how efficient that is. And so in our sessions, what we do is set up opportunities to, within play, within a supportive, interactive relationship, provide opportunities to explore the sensory input that in such a way that we can better understand through all of those levels what that sensory information means and how to respond more adaptively or functionally to use it.
Yeah.
It's such a lot of information in a short period of time.
I feel like we could go on and on and on. Maybe we'll need a part 2 sometime.
Yeah, exactly.
My brain, I feel like I have 20 sensory questions, but
yeah.
For looking at time, I want to make sure we can get to our activity. So I think that's a lot of information too, and a lot of good information out there. So maybe we'll need a part 2.
Yeah, because now I want to talk about fun ways we do sensory-based activities in relationship.
Yeah, and I love what you said, just like really quick about like exploring that. So it's like building that safe relationship, and then you're able to explore the sensory because everybody is so different with their sensory kind of profile. And so when you can build that safety, you can kind of explore the sensory and be like, oh, okay, they're really overreacting to that, or under-responding to this, and kind of build that in that trust.
Yeah.
Which I could see that could be tricky, too, if there's a sensory experience that's unpleasant, building that relationship.
And part of what we do in our sessions, too, is to really highlight what you just said, that everybody's experience of a situation is going to be different. And so a big part of the work that we do, especially with some of the older kids, is to work on that brain-body connection and really tune into what the sensory experience was in a moment. I was having a conversation not too long ago about a roller coaster, and the description that I was receiving was one of excitement and joy and anticipation. And I could feel my body starting to have like tears welling up because I'm more over responsive to movement and visual input. And so we had a great conversation around how important it is to tune into our experiences and share those with others, because we all feel things a little bit differently. And it was so great to have that then interactive relational experience around these sensory concepts that really helped the parent-child get into this process of conversations around what their body's experiencing in any given moment, so they can work through that together.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
We could talk forever.
I know, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. This is awesome information. So we'll wrap up a little bit so we can get to the activity. So kind of together, like how have you pivoted in COVID? You don't have to like go
Oh,
too much into your story, but like, what are you up to now? How are you offering services, and how can people find you?
right. So my website is beyondsensory.org. You can find me there. I'm also on Facebook, Mim at Beyond Sensory, and or Mim Beyond Sensory, sorry. And I'm doing a lot of these telehealth sessions over Zoom, and also doing some outside sessions with proper masking and distancing how we can. That's the beauty of Colorado weather, is that we have a lot of nice days to work with here. And as I mentioned earlier, I have been doing more of that. I have been really appreciating the earbud opportunity. One of the other pivots that I've really enjoyed is like having parent groups and professional groups meeting online. I would love to get another one set up again soon. So if that's something that anyone's interested in, it's a very supportive environment where we can go through basically a process like we talked about today, where we ask those questions of why and provide information about how we process sensation, how regulation works, and try to explore some different strategies together. And it's a very collaborative approach between all the participants. It's not, like I said, it's not about me. It's about how can we provide the families with tools and strategies.
Awesome. So people should email you for now if they're interested.
Yeah. I've also got on my website, there's a checklist that you can fill out. When possible, I like to try to pair people based on age. And obviously we try to base, timing, but I might just at some point just have to say, nope, this is when we have to meet. Yeah. Just for the sake of clarity.
Always. Oh, cool. I'll make sure when this gets posted later that your website and your email is in the description so people can connect with you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
All right. So to end, we have our little activity.
Yes. So like you said, this is an activity to help increase that social connection and awareness with other people. We didn't talk about it today, but there is a music-based listening therapy program that I use a lot of times that is designed to activate the calming portion of our nervous system. And as it's activating the calming part of our nervous system, it's also activating the social engagement part of our nervous system. And as we were talking about, that's super powerful in terms of regulation. So one of the activities I have really enjoyed doing, especially since we're in this virtual world now, is I guess it's kind of like charades. And I will, depending on the age of the child, we'll sit down and we'll write some words out. The parents are involved too, of some different emotions that we might experience. And then what we do is we act them out and we guess our responses with written out words or typed out words. And the reason we do that is because we are doing this while we're listening to that music, and it's a nonverbal activity. And it's nonverbal to really highlight the importance of looking at those facial features and tuning into those subtle cues that we receive from each other.
Cool.
Okay, so you can just randomly pick one of your cards, and then we should spread out our cards. We pre-printed for the sake of time today. But like I said, usually we'll do emotions that are relevant and on the mind of the individual, so that we don't throw anything out they're not yet familiar with.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. So if you just want to pick one out, and then you can show me with your face, and I will see if I can guess with my card which one.
Okay, so I don't show you my card.
Don't show me your card.
Okay.
And don't talk, just show me.
Yeah.
What this might look like.
Yep. So would you have like clients like give a thumbs up since it's a non-talking listening to music?
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Which again, it's good practice for how do we develop nonverbal communication? How do we it brings that awareness and ability to communicate with others without words, and strengthens that system so that we can tune into those cues of safety from each other.
That's awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
Should we do one more? Should I guess you?
Okay.
Okay. Yay!
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, this is fun. I like this a lot. I feel like I could use this in sessions.
It is really fun. And with younger kids, you can do pictures of, it can be pictures from cartoon characters or just pictures you find on Google. You can take pictures of the parents or a sibling with these different things. And then from that picture, we can do, the demonstration and then the guessing.
Awesome. Oh, that's so fun. Thank you so
Super
much for
fun.
sharing.
Absolutely. Thanks for letting me talk so much. I get excited and just.
So much good information, and I'm sorry we didn't get to the safe and sound protocol. That is on your website, though, right? If people want to
Yeah,
kind
you
of
can
look
reach
into
out with
that
more
more.
questions. Feel free. Yeah.
Awesome. And so maybe we'll need a part 2. I feel like there's so much more we could have talked about.
There always is. Yeah.
That's true. There always is. But
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing. Such great, valuable knowledge for other professionals and parents out there. So I'm excited to share this with everybody. But yeah. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks, Bonnie. It's always good to see you.
It's always good to see you too. Well, we'll get this posted shortly on Facebook, YouTube, probably Instagram, and get it shared as much as we can so that people can learn more about you and learn more about sensory processing, relationship-based therapy, the activity, and we'll get that posted soon.
Okay, sounds good. Talk to you later.
Yeah, thanks, ma'am. Have an awesome day.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Bye.